Good evening. I'm Charles D'Angelo, host of Inner Fire, and also a really common guest on Show Me St. Louis here on KSDK5. Tonight I want to drop in with you and just kind of level with you. At 17, I was 360 pounds, and I wish I would have came across a program like tonight's program, because it would have really been able to provide me the insights that I lacked that would have transformed my life. So what I want to do with you tonight is offer you some strategies in my story about where I came from, what really transformed everything in my life, and help you to start to see what's possible for you if you'll put into practice those very same disciplines I learned now over a decade ago. So let me get started by telling you a little bit about my story. I was 360 pounds by the time I was 17. So you're wondering, how does a young guy get to weigh 360 pounds? My family wasn't very privileged. They were hardworking. My parents loved us tremendously, but they didn't have the education of one's habits and their impact on your health. So growing up, food equaled love for us. I grew up in an Italian family. Again, my dad, not having the education of nutrition's impacts on one's health, taught us that, you just ate until you felt full. It wasn't about being satisfied. It was eating until you were full. And the types of foods we ate were cheap, affordable, accessible, convenient things. It wasn't at all uncommon to eat a whole pizza myself at that age. If you can relate to this, and this story and this show is for you tonight, because I was able to turn my whole life around in a very radical amount of time, losing 160 pounds, then going on to help thousands of people all across the country to do the very same thing. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about this very issue is because of the pain I experienced as a young, overweight kid. I ate my lunch often in a bathroom stall because I was made fun of so terribly. I was called all sorts of horrific names that I can't even repeat here tonight with you on television. Things that would literally make you want to throw up if you thought a 7 or 8-year-old kid had to deal with it every single day. Growing up so different, I was always made fun of. I mean, as far back as I can remember being bigger than all the other kids, I was teased and ridiculed. So things that most kids take joy in, like duck, duck, goose, those types of recess games were things that I just was so adamant of avoiding. I remember I was always the last one to be picked for any team sport, and I don't say this to make you feel pity for me. I say it because I want you to understand my life was that. That's where I came from. So when I'm on television on Show Me St. Louis, or I'm here talking to guests that I've helped lose thousands of pounds collectively, it's not with the attitude that, wow, everyone should be fit. It's with the realization that those people, when they come to my office, are in a tremendous amount of pain. Maybe pain you're in tonight. Maybe you're 16, 17, 18 years old, or maybe you're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and you've been on this whole diet yo-yo back and forth over the lifespan so far. Or maybe you're just starting to find the implications of your habits like I did. Maybe you woke up one day and you said to yourself, what in the world happened? How did I end up here? Maybe you've lost and gained weight time and time again. If any of these things sound like you, then you're watching this for a very good reason. God entered my life, and I'm not a preacher or any type of minister. My program's not sectarian, but I do believe in higher power. And when I made the decision to say I would be willing to do everything I could, the best way I could, if God would help me do the rest, my whole life changed. At that age of 17, I went to try to join a club. I was a fitness club. I was so scared of walking through the doors because of all the bullying I'd been through up to that point. But something inside of me, I mustered the courage and I walked through. I got a great sales pitch from a young guy, but I didn't have a credit card, so I was turned away at 360 pounds. Talk about devastated. Here you put yourself out there, you really go for it, you walk into a place you feel you're going to be rejected by, and you are told everything's good, but you can't pay for it. I remember going home, and it was an August afternoon. I collapsed on my bed. My room wasn't air conditioned at the time, and I was a big boy. I was 360 pounds, and I laid on my back, and I remember the television on the nightstand in front of my bed was on, and I was watching cartoons, but every time I would exhale, my stomach was so large, it would obscure the television set in front of me. I remember thinking that I might not be around to see my high school graduation because of my lifestyle. I'd never been on a date. I had never kissed a girl. I had never, ever even went to a social experience like a dance or anything that most kids my age have went to. I felt totally alone. I was My books were knocked out of my hands often when I was walking through the halls in school. I felt like I didn't have any friends, and I was really about to give up on my life. I thought that there was really no point. I mean, all of my father's family, all my relatives struggle with the very issue I was struggling with. I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and my mother's side, while they weren't obese, struggled with substance abuse issues. My mom was a person that was my best friend up until the time I was 10, 11 years old, and then ghosts from her past started to haunt her, and she turned overnight into not only not being my friend, but being someone I was afraid of as a young person. And despite my parents' love and affection, there wasn't anything they could do to change what I was doing. They, of course, made every approach that they could. They told me that they were really afraid for my health, but nothing seemed to click for me. And with the icing on the cake being going to that fitness club and being turned away, I almost started to believe that I was meant not to be here anymore. I remember laying in my bed looking at the ceiling, tears running down my face, thinking that there wasn't any hope for me. And I said to God, if he would just help me become normal, I would commit my life to serving others in whatever way I possibly could to help them in every way I could. Now, I did not have any idea of what that promise would mean. I certainly didn't think that God would use me in the context of being a weight loss coach and helping thousands of people to reclaim their health from their habits like I've been doing now over the last decade. But it just goes to show you that when you really put yourself out there and you do surrender something over to that higher power, anything's possible. But you've got to be able to see it first. So tonight what I want to do is show you what's possible by telling you my story, by letting you see, look, no matter how hopeless you might feel tonight you are, no matter how many times you've tried, how many times you feel you have failed, you haven't failed. You produce a result that's not the result that you want. And there's a simple way to fix that. It's to remind yourself, just because you haven't gotten what you want in the time period you thought you should, doesn't mean you're not going to get it. It might just mean you need to revisit the gestation period. Just like when you plant something in a garden, it doesn't take root and start to grow the next day. If you did that, if you went out and planted seeds today and went outside your garden and nothing had grown, so you decided to dig it all up, well, you're going to screw up the whole process, right? There's this little thing called faith that you have to be willing to embrace if you want to really experience any transformative change in your life. It was something that I wasn't willing to embrace up until that point. It was desperation that led me to really reaching out and saying, I need to take charge of my health. I need to really make some changes that would impact my destiny, if I had a destiny. And I looked around and I couldn't find role models. I couldn't find people that had achieved the things I wanted who were as bad off as I was at that point. So what I want you to see is, look, I was 360 pounds. If I was 360 pounds, my best advice, my best question I could pose to you tonight is, if I could do it, why don't you do it? Now you say, well, what do I have to do, Charles? Okay, it sounds exciting that you've changed your life and you've went on and helped others. And I haven't only changed my life in the physical dimension. I mean, I've changed my life in the spiritual dimension. I've changed my life in the relationship dimension. I've since dated girls. I've changed my life in the financial direction that I've been headed in. So the distinctions I made by improving myself, by working hard on myself, have really colored every other area of my life. So what I want to talk to you tonight are about a couple things that you need to start to shift and what you really need to shift to make the types of changes I have and the type of changes all of my clients have. Now, if my story is not enough to compel you to make the choice to make some changes, go to my website, charlesdangelo.com. You can see a ton of different people that have been featured on Show Me St. Louis and other stories that are from news outlets across the country where I've been featured. People that have lost 100 pounds, people that have totally reversed their type 2 diabetes, people that have had their doctors be able to eliminate all their medications despite years of use by making the changes that we're going to talk about tonight. So at that age, when I made that commitment to God, you say, well, okay, you got turned away from a gym, so how in the world did you end up a decade later lean, fit, a six-pack? I've been in Cosmo magazine. I've counseled and coached doctors, lawyers, leaders, CEOs, actors, actresses, people from all walks of life, as well as average stay-at-home moms and dads. People from every different facet of life you can think of, I have coached and counseled, now numbering in the thousands. You say, so how did that happen? How did you make that radical shift? You certainly wouldn't think that your history would predict your future. I think that your history does not have to predict your future unless you want to live in your history. You see, it's not what's happening to you that's determining where you're going. It's not the storms of life that ultimately determine where you end up. It's what do you do during those storms. A wise man once told me, it's not the winds of life that determine where you end up. Now, for many people it is. Many people go out in life and they just hope that the winds of life carry them somewhere that they want to be. But the people that become achievers, the people like you that tune into this type of program, are people that decide to actually use the wind to carry themselves to where they want to be. And you ask, well, how do I set myself in that direction? You start to look at a couple things. First, you need to really think about, what direction are you headed? Where are you going right now? In a year from now, are you going to be closer to the things you want, if you even know what those things are? The thing I had to do at 17, laying in my bed after making that commitment, was decide, what do I want? And I made the decision, I want to be able to take my shirt off and feel confident. As a 17-year-old, that's a big deal. It's nothing that's very exciting to me anymore. But at that age, it's something that's appropriate. I wanted to be able to have the confidence to go after my dreams. I wanted to be able to dream again and feel that things were possible. I didn't want to feel limited. I wanted to feel that anything I could think of, I could achieve. And so with that in mind, I began to study success. I started to look for people that had the physique, the body, the skills that I lacked. And I learned exactly what they did. How did they eat? How did they exercise? Because there was no lack of diets, no lack of DVDs, no lack of trainers or nutritionists out there. But obviously there was a problem because I wasn't fit. And I had the whole list of things to give reason to believe I should be overweight. My parents were overweight, or my dad's family all was. My mom was struggling with alcoholism. I had tons of stress in school. So of course, Charles, you could think you're going to be 360 pounds. But there was a big problem with that whole list. And the problem was I wasn't one of the things that was listed. I recognized that if I wanted my life to be tremendously different, I was going to have to be totally different than I had been. So ask yourself where you're heading, or what are the things that you want for yourself. After you get really clear and really compelled by those things, I mean, these have to be exciting things. What do I want to achieve physically? What do I want to achieve from a health perspective? Who do I want to meet? What type of career do I want to have? How much financially do I want to have? Because ultimately, let me ask you a question. If you're not healthy and don't feel good, do you think that you're able to accomplish all you have in mind for yourself? Do you think that you can go after your financial goals? Do you think that you can attract into your life the type of person you deserve to be with if you don't feel good about yourself? Never mind what other people think. If you don't feel good about yourself, if you're in a relationship right now and it doesn't have the passion and the charge that you really want, no matter what your partner tells you about you, does it really matter if you don't believe it? So I'm here to say that everything that you're doing is having a consequence, whether it be positive or negative. And it's not what's happening to you that's determining the direction your life is headed. It's what you're doing about what's happening. So you need to start to make an investment in your own development. Don't begrudge reading another book, trying another program or a different approach, even if you haven't gotten a result. Just don't do the things that haven't worked. And I'm here to tell you, you have never done what I'm recommending tonight. My program is not a diet. It's not an exercise program. Are those both vital pieces of this entire equation? Yes. But this is a system of personal philosophy, of totally transforming your mindset so that food does not have the grasp on you that it currently does. You see, I didn't recognize that I was essentially addicted to poor quality food. If I would go a day or a half a day, much less, without a regular soda, I would have debilitating headaches, to the point I would have to be in a dark room. I mean, have you ever felt that way if you haven't had sugar, if you haven't had a soda? If the answer is yes, I'm here to tell you I was able to overcome that by what I teach. What you need to do first, after coming up with all those goals, is ask yourself, now that you have the list, who do I have to be to have these things that I want? So you want to have a six-pack. You want to have energy. You want to have vitality. You want to be successful in school or be able to climb the corporate ladder. Well, who do you have to be, or who do you have to become to have the things that you want? And therein lies the solution. You see, I think people avoid things often circumventing their own success. They have these habits, these personal attitudes and habits that totally keep them away from ever achieving their dreams. Their dreams are totally within reach, and the resources they have are right inside of them. But because of these habits of thinking, this habit of thought, this mindset, They avoid ever really going out there and getting what they want. And what you really do, and what I used to do, is this. You have the habit of guilt. You tell yourself, you know, this shouldn't have happened in my past. I should have been a better parent. I should have been able to deal with that better. I should have been able to not make that mistake. I should have solved through this issue. And because you have that guilt and you're not ready to move on from it, you try to placate it or deal with it by using something. If you're like the former me, you use food. You feel bad about something you said to your mom or your dad, or maybe to your loved one, your husband, your wife. So you find yourself in the kitchen this hour eating things you know you shouldn't be. When in reality, if you take some time to say, guilt is really a good indicator. It tells me I'm a good person, I had a high expectation for myself, and I didn't meet it. You see the difference? There's no need to punish yourself or to distract yourself with food if you use guilt as a messenger. Something's telling you, look, I had a good standard for myself and I didn't meet it. Another habit people oftentimes find themselves in is blame. Well, you don't understand, and I was one of these people. They come to me and they say, you don't understand, Charles. The reason I'm overweight is because I lost my parent when I was 12 years old. My house burned down. I just lost my job. Am I saying any of those things are invalid? Absolutely not, but it's certainly not the reason that you're overweight. The reason you're overweight is because of one thing, the choices that you are making. And that's not a harsh judgment. I am not judging you. I'm simply saying that if you're willing to embrace responsibility, stop avoiding responsibility, and embrace it, you give yourself the power to totally take your life to where you design it to be. You see, the future requires you pull back the curtain and you start to look to where you're headed. People that feel hopeless, like I did at 17, ready to give up on their life, they don't believe there is a future. They can't see past the moment. Their emotions, their desperation, their negativity have totally occluded and fogged out their vision. So tonight, this video has come to you for a very specific reason. It's to light your way to your future. You don't have to see 500 feet ahead. You just need to see the first step. And that first step tonight is this. Start to set those goals. Know that if someone else, if Charles has done it, then I can do it. And if Charles isn't reason enough to believe, well, then I'll go to his website and I'll see all the other people that have done it that he's helped. Because I'm here to tell you, you can make your life any way you want it with God's help, and if you're willing to do the work. Nothing good comes without labor. I mean, think about it. It's something nature teaches us. How many times have you seen a woman on a television program on one of these networks that talks about, you know, raising children, and all of a sudden they're in the laboring process and they're swearing up and down they're never going to have a child again, right? Okay, but very rarely do they hold to that idea, because what comes from that labor is so rewarding they're willing to go through the pain again. You're going to have to deal in your life with one of two things. Either the pain of saying, I'm going to discipline myself to get what I want, which isn't a very painful experience at all. It just means letting go of needing something immediately so that you can have something very rewarding in the future. Or you can choose the pain of regret. And that pain is, I should have, I could have, God gave me all the opportunities, but I didn't. Have you been there? Telling yourself, I could have changed before, I should have changed before, but I didn't. I know all too well what neglect does in a person's life. My father passed away at 54 years of age of a massive heart attack after years of neglect. He came to see me after his first heart attack and did lose 50 pounds, but unfortunately when you do the right thing at the wrong time, sometimes doesn't work out. He died of that massive heart attack. My father's father, my grandpa, died of diabetes, a complication because of it. When he died not of an immediate pronounced cause from diabetes. He went in for a heart procedure, like my father, but during the procedure, his colon ruptured. When the doctors came to talk to me, they said that it was amazing that he was still living. His colon was worn tissue paper thin. So the stress of the procedure caused all of his waste to spill out, thereby causing him to go into septic shock and die. You see, that's the harsh reality, my friend, of what comes when you choose neglect or you choose regret over discipline. Discipline has a bad connotation in our society because we want everything right now. But I'm here to tell you, nothing that you get quickly usually lasts. Things that are worthwhile are earned over time. I didn't go from 360 pounds to looking like this overnight. It took me a period of time of losing all that fat, then going and building muscle, doing it in a strategic way. So if you're willing to set these goals, ask yourself, who am I going to need to be to have the things I want? Your life is automatically going to start to move in the direction you want. Thirdly, you need a good strategy, because wanting it's really good, but if you're running the wrong way, no matter how well-intentioned you are, you won't get there. You know, when I lost the weight, I was so compelled by how much my life had changed and how much better everything was for me and how happy I was. I said, I have to keep good on that promise I made to God. So I started coaching people, and it was like miraculous. People started losing weight one after the other after the other. And it wasn't because of some magical diet or some new exercise program I had developed. It was because I was teaching them how to change their philosophy and their attitude about themselves, putting themselves as a priority again, not avoiding responsibility, but taking responsibility for themselves. I helped them realize that if they were willing to accept responsibility, they were the captains of their destiny. And all of a sudden, these people just started dropping weight, dropping weight, dropping weight. My reputation spread first in St. Louis, then in Missouri, then the region, and eventually across the country. I was being featured in national magazines and publications and television programs, to the point that I got offered a book deal. And I wrote my book, Think and Grow Thin. It's right here, in fact. It's a book that took me about 5 years to write. I wrote it while I was in college. And what I did was I said, if all the strategies I've been using have helped so many people, how can I spread that to as many people as possible? Because I'm just one guy. That's why I'm on television with you here tonight. At 17, if I would have popped on the screen, the current me, you know, it might have changed my life and it might have saved me years of pain. I know it might have saved my father's life if he would have tuned in to a guy like me that said, look, you don't have to buy into this belief that because of your genetics or because of your history or because of the tragedies you've been through, you have to let your life just be under someone else's control. Or you have to accept that because a doctor once gave you this label, this is the way it's always going to be. More and more physicians today are saying that your choices have more an impact on your health than anything else. So I took all this information, all this data, everything that I've developed, and I put it into this book, Think and Grow Thin. It gives an exact step-by-step guide as to how to take yourself, whether you're 50 pounds overweight, 100 pounds or more overweight, wherever you are, and to start to put into practice the very principles that I'm espousing to you tonight that I did, now over a decade ago, that transformed every facet of my life. If you're at the point in your life where you're ready to give up, where you don't feel there's any hope, where you feel like maybe you've lost someone or more than one person close to you. I have one of the most important people in my life. She lost both her mother, her father, her cousin, and her uncle, all while she was between the ages of 10 and 17 years old. Yet she came out of that stronger, more resilient, happier, and giving to other people more than anyone else that I really have had the privilege and honor of meeting. You see, it's not what happens to you, again, that's going to determine where you end up in this life. It's what you do with what happens. What you do means what the meaning is that you're giving to this. Two people can come from the same home. One goes on to be the President of the United States, another goes on to be a serial killer. What's the difference? The choices and the meaning that they gave to what happened to them when they were younger. You see, one person says, you have to excuse the way I am because of what happened. The other person says, I'm never going to let such a thing ever happen in my family or in anyone else's. You have the power to not only influence your life, but to influence the lives of all those around you. You have the power to make your life any way you want it. What I offer you tonight is this, an idea. What if, by making some simple changes, 1, 2, 3 millimeter little changes here and there with how you eat, what you're doing with activity, what if that took you to a whole new place in your life? What if you woke up feeling good again? What if all of a sudden, once you started to make these changes, opportunities started flowing in your life that you hadn't seen before? You see, I truly believe when you start to do what you can, all of a sudden God starts to send in all these different, the right people, the right experiences, the right opportunities, so that you can become the person you were destined to be. I believe we're all born with a purpose. And I think when you're overweight and you're unhealthy and you're unhappy, that it's very difficult to see that purpose. I'm not saying it's always impossible, but I'm saying if you're not happy with yourself, if you wake up and you're not excited to start your day, If you just say, boy, on Monday morning, I can't wait till Friday, obviously that should tell you that there's something off with your life. If you're not living your life where you're leaving nothing inside, where you're just pouring everything you got out, where you go to sleep empty every night, if you're not living that way, I don't think you're living to your full potential. I think that you could experience so much more from your life. But to experience more, you're going to have to be more. You're going to have to think a little differently. And again, I don't recommend some specific diet or some specific exercise program or DVD. What I'm recommending is a way of thinking, a way of disconnecting emotion from food and then eventually learning how to reconnect so you can have the life that you really deserve and were born to have. To do so, again, requires a little maturity. Doesn't matter if you're 14, 15, 16, 17, or you're later in life, 50, 60, 70, 80. It's never too late to embrace a new approach to life. And the cool thing is, when you embrace that new approach, everything changes. I was told very early, if I would take charge of my habits, everything would change in my life. And I'm living proof. I came from a family, like I said, where my dad was a janitor. We didn't grow up with much. We were afforded the best education and the most love that my parents knew how to show us. But you wouldn't think that I would go on to be dining with presidents, you know, to wake up one day and to know that evening in my mid-20s, I'd be having dinner with one of the former presidents of the United States. I don't say that to impress you. I say that to impress upon you, if I can do it, why don't you? Why don't you start to dream again and start to think about what's possible for you? Why settle? Why accept the status quo when you could be and have so much more for yourself that totally not only impacts your life, but by you having more, you're able to give more to other people. You see, if you can do more for yourself and you can do more yourself, you're much more able to do for other people. So in closing, I just want to say thanks for staying with me for these last about 28 minutes. I know that you were meant to watch this program. I know that God's working in your life, and I know that there might be things that are really upsetting you and have you feeling down. And I know that if I would have had the opportunity to hear myself now talk when I was younger, it would have really changed my life. And my hope is that you heard something tonight that changes the direction you're headed. If nothing else, it helped pull back the curtain on your future to show that there is something greater ahead for you. But for you to have more and for things to be greater, well, again, you're going to have to step up and be greater. So if you want more information, go to my website, charlesdangelo.com, or pick up a copy of my book, Think and Grow Thin. We'll see you next time.